Appearing in front of Wisconsin's Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections, Michael Gableman says he's taking legal action against two mayors who have not cooperated in a Republican-backed investigation into the 2020 election.
November 29, I filed two petitions for writs of attachment in the Circuit Court for Waukesha County against the mayors of Green Bay and Madison.
Gableman argues the mayors have not explained their reasoning or to what extent they used grant money from Center for Tech and Civic Life, a group backed by Mark Zuckerberg. The nonprofit awarded the grants to Wisconsin's 5 biggest cities, Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, Kenosha, and Racine, for the election.
Reasonable minds might wonder whether the millions of dollars each of these mayors received from the Zuckerbergs may have induced them to do something other than treat all candidates fairly and impartially, and whether those mayors used the Zuckerberg money to get out the vote for Joe Biden. These questions have been left unasked.
Mayor Eric Genrich says any new legal action has not been communicated to the city. In a statement, he says the news of Mr. Gableman's request for a writ was never communicated to the city directly and was instead brought to our attention through press inquiries related to Mr. Gableman's most recent public testimony. Genrich goes on to say the city has been cooperative to requests into the election and that, in response to correspondence the city received from Mr. Gableman and his staff, the city provided almost 20,000 pages of publicly available documents and communicated the need for additional information with regards to any next steps.
Officials, mayors, and clerks.
During Wednesday's hearing, committee member and Democratic State Representative Mark Spritzer asked Gableman for the same level of transparency he's asking of the mayors.
Are you willing to interview Mayor Genrich, Mayor Rhodes-Conway in public and have the kind of transparency that you claim you're asking for and have them answer questions before the entire public of Wisconsin so that everybody can understand what their role was and what their answers to your questions are?
In response, Gableman argues that any public interviews could be compromising to the investigation.
Going from teaching in a classroom to virtual, then back to the classroom, only to be teaching online again. Without question, the pandemic has added some extra anxiety to teachers and schools.
Teachers are under extreme stress. I mean, it's a very difficult job, first of all. The second thing is that it's been made even more difficult because they essentially have to do two different jobs.
In a memo from the Oshkosh Area School District's Human Resource Department, along with other departments, the school board is asked to consider using 2 snow days as mental health and wellness days for staff. The reason? Because of the stressors occurring this year. Peggy Wirtz-Olson, president of the Wisconsin Education Association Council, speaks with educators across the state often.
I've heard from them pointedly about what that increased workload has been, the increased hours, the mental health needs of their students, their own mental health needs. All of that has been exacerbated throughout the past few months.
Psychologists say more and more teachers have been diagnosed with depression since the onset of the pandemic.
In America, 25% of the people could be diagnosed with depression. Teachers that are being prescribed antidepressants just because of the stressful nature over the last year and a half or 2 years.
This increased workload or burnout is why some say we may be living in the great resignation and seeing so many worker shortages, including teacher shortages.
Employers really across the board, they're looking for ways to keep employees. And so if it means using 2 snow days to make that happen, they're going to be taking it.
The district has 5.8 days built into the schedule to allow for inclement weather, snow, and emergency days. With this, that figure would drop to 3.8 days. And while the memo notes that this is only meant for this year, some say maybe it shouldn't be.
Our hope is that there'll be that opportunity to bring educators back to the table, to roll up our sleeves and come up with those common solutions that are going to help the mental health needs of all our students and our colleagues.
Local health officials are learning more each day about the new variant Omicron.
There's a new variant coming out of South Africa that has several different mutations in the genetic sequence of that virus. Exactly what that's going to mean for us is not quite yet known.
A lot of information is coming in from around the world right now, studying those patients. Because there's one thing about studying the variant in a lab, which is being done, but you also want to see what it does in the real world.
Dr. Brad Burmeister, an emergency doctor with Bellin Health, says right now we have more questions than answers. But he says experts are saying not to panic.
We have a lot of science. We're in a much better spot than we were even a year ago, and we have the ability to continue to navigate the course of this pandemic.
Prevea Health President and CEO Dr. Ashok Rai says this is the time to stress vaccinations and boosters.
When you look at the protection of the vaccines, especially for those who receive the boosters, it seems to be very good. And it would be the only protection we have against this variant getting a stronghold.
Dr. Rai says hospitalizations across the state remain high. He says 20% of their beds are taken up by COVID patients.
So if you think about going into your busiest time of the year for being a hospital, this is where we start to see a lot more accidents, heart attacks, other viral illnesses, influenza, and all of a sudden 20% of your beds are taken away. It's causing a ton of stress.
With the holiday season in full swing, Dr. Rai reminds folks to stay home if you have symptoms, mask up, and get vaccinated.